Rise from your grave.
Number 10. Outlaws. The library of games centered around the Old West is admittedly a limited one. Years before Rockstar's superb Red Dead Redemption hit the market, now defunct LucasArts released its own acclaimed Western. Utilizing a heavily modified Dark Forces engine, Outlaws used fun gameplay, heavily stylized cutscenes, and a stunning Morricone-inspired soundtrack to make up for what were, even for its time, modest graphics. Gamers expect a lot more these days, and because of that, anyone creating a successor to Outlaws would definitely have to up the ante. Parts of the original game, such as its repetitive item and key fetching, wouldn't stand the test of time. But cel shading has been used effectively in recent years, and the same engaging art style and simple but entertaining gunfighting mechanics could be achieved in an Outlaws reboot. It would be a welcome, fanciful departure from the gritty realism of other competitors in the genre. With no real brand to draw from, however, one can't be too optimistic about this game ever actually happening. Number 9. Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Set in Rockstar's vision of a 1980s Miami, the follow-up to Grand Theft Auto 3 took the celebrated series one step further. The setting provided the perfect canvas for the developers. Who can forget the game's drug lords, the 80s flash and excess, and the grimy underbelly of all of that beachfront glamour? Vice City opened up the franchise through its sheer ambition. Rockstar incorporated greater storytelling, more peripheral activities, a love him or hate him protagonist actively engaged in the plot, and an amazing soundtrack tailored to the period. Liberty City and San Andreas have both been revisited, yet Vice City, with the exception of a single mobile game, remains conspicuously absent. It's probably only a matter of time before we go back there. But until then, Vice City makes this list. Number 8. System Shock 2. Co-developed by Irrational Games and Looking Glass Studios, System Shock 2 succeeded in the genre of sci-fi survival horror, where big-budget movies such as Event Horizon failed. Designed by Ken Levine, who would later work on both BioShock and BioShock Infinite, the game made expert use of its ghost ship environment, creating in the process a deeply atmospheric game. Released in 1999, the game is showing its age, but given the commercial success of the BioShock franchise, perhaps a reboot isn't outside the realm of possibility.
Here we are,
Number 7. Bully. No one can accuse Rockstar of not taking risks. From Manhunt to Ping Pong to L.A. Noire, they have demonstrated a willingness to venture outside of the mold. Bully was one such effort. Although a game about a grade school protagonist may not be for everyone, it holds true that the intimate setting of this title gave the writers an opportunity to develop characters and interactions that simply aren't possible in other settings. There's a level of socialization in this kind of an environment that's often missing later in life. It's this element that contributed to the charm and success of the Harry Potter franchise. It's this element that set Bully apart. Although it's not an easy script to tackle, it should surprise no one if a follow-up is developed at some point down the line. Of course, by the time that actually happens, a lot of the people who enjoyed the original will have outgrown the sequel. Number 6. Super Metroid. While there have certainly been numerous follow-ups to Nintendo's hit 1994 release, the evolution of the industry has led to subsequent iterations of the franchise being fully three-dimensional. What fans of the series have missed out on since then is the pure, unmolested gameplay of the first 3 releases. Whether it was Metroid, Metroid 2, or Super Metroid, all 3 took full advantage of the side-scrolling nature of the game to provide for challenging, fun, and addictive gameplay. Super Metroid remains popular, and for good reason. The features introduced, if not perfected in the game, provide something that newer versions cannot. A polished, AAA successor in the side-scrolling style could bring back that lost gameplay. Number 5. Roller Coaster Tycoon. Oh, there have been some follow-ups, but none have come close to the charm and addictiveness of the original and its near clone, Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. Taking some of the best parts of Bullfrog's theme park, Roller Coaster Tycoon kept the endearing British silliness while focusing more on the roller coasters, as the name implies. This style of game may not be quite as popular on consoles as on PC and Mac, but there's still a market for this. Successful releases such as Prison Architect, Euro Truck Simulator, and even Minecraft demonstrate that, at least for some, the genres of simulation and building still scratch an itch. Number 4. Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic. One way to keep George Lucas out of your project is to shift your timeline back by thousands of years. Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic was a smash hit and a selling point for the original Xbox. It struck on two key gamer erogenous zones: character building and lightsabers. Although the original Knights of the Old Republic was followed by a sequel, the second game in the series was rushed, and it showed the signs. Regardless, other than the massively multiplayer game, The Old Republic, it has been some years since any offering in this particular sub-universe has come along. With Disney now owning the rights to the Star Wars franchise, there's no telling when, if ever, we'll see a third game. One can live in hope that, once they've satisfied themselves with the new movie tie-ins, Disney will look back to the Old Republic franchise and make a follow-up game to the excellent original Knights of the Old Republic. Number 3. Castlevania: Symphony of the Night. Phase 1. Create younger, hipper Dracula and spell his name as Dracula backwards. Phase 2. Copy Super Metroid. Phase 3. Profit. In an era when the move was to full 3D gaming, the Castlevania series remained faithful to its side-scrolling roots. The loyalty paid off, as Castlevania: Symphony of the Night was a masterpiece. Eschewing the Belmont family for Alucard as the game's central character, Symphony of the Night treated gamers to a free roam of Dracula's castle. The hero was no longer static, and instead could be leveled up and even overpowered depending on what you chose to use from the game's large item inventory. Although perhaps unintentional, the game's strange dialogue and storytelling only enhanced the nightmarish surrealism. All of this was finished off with a truly amazing soundtrack. There have been other attempts to recapture the magic, but none have reached the heights achieved by Symphony of the Night. Number 2. Final Fantasy VII. Despite gamers looking at this title through rose-colored glasses and the roughly 20 years of legend worship, Final Fantasy VII has a very strong case for being the peak of this storied franchise. The original wowed audiences with its pre-rendered cutscenes, stellar soundtrack, entertaining combat system, dark atmosphere, and whopping 4-disc length. Sony have trolled us with such stunts as a Final Fantasy VII tech demo and an unveiling of a re-release of the original game. To date, nothing has been announced regarding a true out-and-out remake. Expectations would be through the roof for any such project, and the team behind a re-release would have to come to grips with such issues as voice acting versus the original text dialogue. Even minor changes to the game's popular Materia system could spell doom to the reception of a reboot. But who knows? In a world where they made a girl band sequel to the original Final Fantasy X, I suppose anything is possible. Number 1. X-Wing and TIE Fighter. This one is a tie, no pun intended. No games need a reboot more than the much heralded LucasArts classics X-Wing and TIE Fighter. Released with what were for the time cutting-edge visuals, these games immersed fans of the Star Wars movies in the roles of ace fighter pilots for the respective factions. X-Wing and TIE Fighter struck a chord with gamers, mixing together a satisfying blend of simulation, Star Wars action, and pure arcade fun. With TIE Fighter, RPG elements were added, and the player could rise in the ranks of the Emperor's secret organization. Few games would benefit more from the development of computing power and subsequent graphics improvement in the decades since these games were first released. There are several reasons why this hasn't been done before now. The release of multiple titles of this series in the 1990s undoubtedly gave a lot of gamers X-Wing fatigue. but the disappearance of the series also coincides with the release of the prequel trilogy and the attendant movie tie-ins with those films. With the new movies moving back to the world of X-Wings, fans of this venerable series might one day see a true and worthy successor. Until that day arrives, fans of the originals will have to make do with the originals. There is some good news in that GOG.com has re-released the original series of these games, and they should be compatible with modern hardware. There are also mods for the last in the original series, X-Wing Alliance, which enhance the game to a certain extent. Thanks for watching. I'm sure that there are lots of other opinions on what should be placed on the list, but whether you agree or disagree, I appreciate any likes or subscribes you can send this way. It's said that old soldiers never die, they just slowly fade away. And so in that spirit, I'm going to let this vintage footage roll. Thanks again for watching.